All the selectmen are present, except for Selectman McCoy. He's unable to attend tonight. He's this evening's meeting. He's got a family matter. And we'll start by transmitting Treasury warrants 17, 17A, 17B, 18, and 18A.
Move the warrants as read by the chairman.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? It's unanimous. We have no approval of these meetings. So we're right to our 7 o'clock appointment with Dean Roberts, District Field Manager of Panera, doing business as Panera Bread. Request to obtain a common victualer's license for property located at 228 Main Street. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. So I'm Dean Roberts, and this is Bert Kudamashe, who will be the general manager of the Panera Bread.
Very good. Do we have the a butter?
We have, in this case, recommendations, Mr. Chairman.
Recommendations, okay.
Right. There were no butter notices required.
Okay, sorry about that.
And the recommendations are as follows. The Health Director, Shelley Newhouse, recommends approval for the common victual license for Panera, and the Inspector of Buildings, Mr. Spalding, also reviewed the application, and there are no outstanding zoning issues.
Okay. Did you want to say anything?
No, unless you have
The
questions.
application,
But
what
we're
says
excited
it?
to, yeah, we're excited to be here
Okay.
in town, and we can't wait to open the cafe, hopefully towards the end of the year, end of December.
Any comments or questions or motion from the board?
Mr. Chairman, we probably want to be as specific as we can with regard to the date of opening. Where this is so close to the end of the year, the board could give a license that extends through December 31st of 2012. Normally, they would give a license that extends to the end of the year. So I'm not clear on what that means. I'm sure it's not the question of $50, which is all it is. However, the board does not meet again, and after the well, assuming the board takes the same schedule, they only meet once in December, unless they were going to meet the day after Christmas. But December 12th is their next meeting. So I'm not sure when you say the end of the year, probably even after that.
It could be somewhere between the 20th to the 27th when we do open the cafe. So.
Okay, at the end.
So my recommendation to the board would, if the board is so inclined to grant the common victual license, to grant it for a period to extend until December 31, 2012.
Okay. Anything else on that? Any questions, comments, or a motion from the board?
I have questions that aren't related to the vote on the permit. I'm in favor, given the approvals or the recommendations from the town boards. But I did, since we had the gentleman here, I wanted to ask him a couple questions. I can ask the questions after the vote if you prefer, because my questions have nothing to do with the vote.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the questions were, if I may,
Sure,
since I have you here.
Yeah.
This is at the Wilmington Plaza.
Correct.
And it's, if I remember correctly, I think I've seen some of the construction going on. It's the far left, the absolute.
Correct. Yeah, it's where there's a
The end
vacant
of the-
spot. This shows the exterior of the building.
And I think I saw in here that there will be some small number of outside dining tables. Is that accurate? Which I imagine only in good weather. We're looking at, and those that are watching this or hearing this recognize what the property looks like. Where are the tables going to be relative to the property?
It'll be right as you exit towards the front on the corner,
Okay.
of the building.
And the main entrance for your customers will be right in the front, in line with all the rest of the doors for the other establishments. Is there access to the building for customers on the side entrance?
There is.
So you'll
Yes.
have people coming and going on the left and the front?
Yeah, more emergency exits
Okay.
along the side, but they can access the cafe from that side as well.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I looking at the grid, I could try to visualize what that was going to be, but I wasn't exactly sure what you were trying to get at. So.
Yeah, and up front, it's just something that we typically do with our cafes, just to try to have a little bit of open air seating, which a lot of folks enjoy. and something that we bring to the community and to the neighborhood. So that's why we wanted to add a few seats out there.
Very well, thank you. Those are my brief questions. I wish you great success in your efforts here in Wilmington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, it should be noted, the outdoor seating is regulated through the building inspector and the planning board?
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, so that there would be barriers and everything
Yeah,
else?
yeah.
Right, it's not just that there'd be chairs just hanging out there?
No,
Right,
no,
so
yeah, we've
people to
looked.
understand that.
Yeah, we're under construction in our cafe in Lexington, and we've put up a brick wall. So I'm not sure exactly the extent of how far we'll go, with this, but there will be some type of safety barrier between.
Very good. Any other
Mr.
questions?
Chairman, I move that we grant the request as it's been presented, and specifically for the license to be valid through the end of calendar year 2012.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor? It's unanimous. Good luck.
Great, thanks very much, appreciate it. Have a good night.
Okay, our 7:05 appointment with the representative, with the representatives of Wilmington VFW for a donation of a light for the flagpole at the Wilmington Cemetery Veterans Lot. We have Richard Harris and Eddie Williams from the Wilmington VFW. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Tonight, we're here, Mr. Town Manager, Chairman Lou, and the select persons on the Board of Selectmen. Would like to make a presentation to the town of Wilmington from the local VFW Post 2458 for this light to be installed on the flagpole at the cemetery where the Veterans Lot is. So the flags will not have to be taken down anymore. They can be illuminated at night, and the flag will be flying over the veterans' graves 24/7. So on behalf of the Wilmington VFW 2458, myself, Eddie, and the rest of the members voted to present this to the town of Wilmington.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sure.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
These guys are all business, doing their thing and then taking off. But I just want to take a moment just to thank the VFW for the presentation and the work that they do year-round. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of service organizations, that's the kind of things that they do, and I know this was brought up at one of their meetings, and I think it's very nice of them to bring it. We'll have the town installed, and the flag at the Veterans Lot will be illuminated. Thank you. It's already up.
Yeah.
Okay, our 7:10 appointment. This is for a special presentation relative to the Wilmington Fire Department.
Mr. Chairman, Kristen
Yes.
Griglick is here, who represents Liberty Mutual, along with Chief Bradbury, and Ms. Griglick has a special announcement.
All right.
We're waiting with bated breath.
Right. So I'd like to thank the town manager, Mr. Kyra, Chief Bradbury, the Board of Selectmen, and the residents of Wilmington for allowing me to make this special award presentation to the Wilmington Fire Department. I'd like to give special recognition to Scott Garant for his help promoting the contest. And on behalf of Liberty Mutual, and also being a Wilmington resident, I am honored to announce that Wilmington Fire Department has, for the second year in a row, won Liberty Mutual's Be Fire Smart contest and a $10,000 grant. Liberty runs the contest because tight budgets across the nation have resulted in cutbacks in service and equipment, so I'm sure that this $10,000 will be put to good use. I read that a local resident said Liberty Mutual should just make the checks out to the town of Wilmington when we run these contests. I think she's right. So keep taking those online quizzes, and hopefully I'll be back again with another check in July. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. All right.
Want to come out front here? And So take a photo, not bad. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's all right. Yeah, I know, no, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm taking out, this is a new camera for me, so.
You mentioned
Congratulations, Chief. Thank you very much. Maybe you want to say a few words on what we might use this for?
Certainly, that'd be great. I can't believe it's the second year. And it is, Scott Durant really did push for this. He got the word out, and more importantly, I think he gets the word out of just fire safety in general to folks, and kind of puts it in front of their minds. But right now, we're looking toward, last year the purchase was a thermal imaging camera that really helps us locate folks that we normally wouldn't be able to find in smoke-filled atmospheres, those fires, industrial fires, and that sort of thing. This year, we've kind of gone a little bit the other way, and we're going to purchase it's called the Lucas chest compression system, and it's something that somebody's in cardiac arrest. American Heart Association has come out and said that chest compressions are the most important thing right now to have a successful outcome. And as we're moving folks from their dwellings or place that this incident might happen, a lot of times they're not in a position that we can do chest compressions on them effectively. So even in a sitting position, this machine straps on, delivers quality, consistent compressions, which is going to improve the outcome for those kind of people. And then as we're transporting, typically one of the firefighters has to be unbelted, straddling the stretcher while the vehicle's moving. So now we can have this person secure in the back of the vehicle while the chest compressions are being administered, and then they can assist with all the other things that need to happen during that. So again, thank you, Kristen, and to Scott and Liberty Mutual for making it possible. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Any comments from the board or anything? It's all been said.
It's good
Not much you
stuff.
can really say other than
Yeah,
what
wow.
a wonderful, wonderful thing to have happen again.
You know, I don't want to have it lose. I mean, Scott Durant was a spearhead that really brought this to the attention of those that took the quiz, and it's just sheer numbers. The more people that take the quiz and go up and register, and it gets us the recognition and eventually gets us the, gets us to win. I want to pay tribute to all those folks that took the quiz. I really do. I want to, and I guess that's everyone that's listening to my voice now and watching this broadcast. It's all of the people from Wilmington that went and took the time. It was, a couple of minutes. It's actually kind of fun. You end up learning something. So really everyone wins, and ultimately the town of Wilmington was a big winner here. So I want to thank everyone in Wilmington for participating in this. It's a win for everyone. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Our 7:15 appointment is with Donald Onset, the DPW Superintendent, Michael Woods, Water and Sewer Superintendent, and Shelley Newhouse, Health Director, and we're going to talk about the reduced road salt operations plan. Good evening. You have 3 chairs up there, sure. This was brought up at our last meeting, talking about reduced salt possibly getting in the water supply and the safety of the roads in a reduced salt area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Don Arside. I'm the Superintendent of Public Works for the town of Wilmington. And as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we discussed this, or the board discussed this at the last meeting. There was some concerns about, what we were doing. Certainly, concerns that we don't want to decrease the level of service that people of Wilmington have come to expect from our winter road treatment, treating and plowing. But recognizing the adverse impact that salt has on our water supply with the conclusion of the EPA study, we felt that it was necessary for us to take a step forward and look at our own operation. At the same time, the Board of Health is going to be trying to put some pressure on the state to do the same thing. But we recognize that part of the problem is ours, and we took a look at what we're doing and felt that we could improve our operation, at the same time reduce the amount of salt that we put down on town roads. The town's goal in the reduced salt operations is to reduce that amount of salt. Right now, we put down about 3,000 tons per winter just on town roads, about 110 miles of town roads that we treat. And we think with this proposal that we have, there is a memo that outlines this proposal, we can reduce that by about 30%. That would be almost 1,000 tons, around 1,000 tons over the course of the winter. And quite simply, what we're proposing to do is to take the current method, the current materials, which are salt, sand and salt mix. So once in a while, we use calcium chloride, and change that to a salt mix with a more environmentally friendly compound. And what this compound is a combination, a liquid combination of manganese chloride and a agricultural byproduct. It could be molasses, it could be some type of byproduct from a agricultural production, sometimes from beer. And we plan to use that, mix that with the salt, and because of the effectiveness that other communities that have used this have found, we think we can reduce our salt that we put down on the road. There are some advantages of this material. It's far less corrosive than salt and calcium chloride. It is safe for plants and animals, and it's a much environmentally friendly compound as opposed to salt, which we use quite heavily. So this year we plan to start that program. The other change that we're proposing is that we would look at really reducing the amount of sand that we put down. We really don't find that that's very effective in most circumstances. We have, at the end of the winter, we have quite a mess to clean up with the sand. Our stormwater system is overloaded with pollutants because of that. So we think we can really reduce the amount of sand with this process. And what we plan to do more this year than we've done in the past is do a pre-application right before the storm starts. We'll go out with this combination of salt and this magnesium chloride and agricultural byproduct, and put it down on the surface right when the snow is starting. And we feel that will help break the bond between the snow and the road surface. A lot of times when we don't do that, we end up with a hard pack. We find we put down a lot of salt to break that hard pack, and we feel that this process will also help us reduce the amount of salt that we put down. So those are the two major changes that we're proposing for this year. We will report back to the town manager on what our findings are at the end of the winter with recommendations for further work in the future. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. Obviously, this is not something you just thought of since our last meeting. It's something you've been working on for a while.
It's something we've been working on for a while. We actually did try this product about 5 years ago and had some limited success. We had some success with it, but some operational problems. The manufacturers of the product have been working on those operational problems, and the communities that we've been speaking to that have used this have really been quite happy with it. I have to say that New Hampshire is probably ahead of Massachusetts in this area, and most of the communities that we've been talking to and visiting are in New Hampshire. And after the homework that we've done and the improvements that have been made to the product, we're pretty excited about
Very good.
about using this.
Any questions or comments from the board?
with respect to your, the memorandum here in the Phase 1, you talk about trying to phase this in and doing some of the things that you just discussed, and then the next phase, looking at capital expenditures to better accommodate that process. I assume that the Phase 1 that you're talking about is throughout the entire town, though? You're not doing certain areas of town just to check out the results, right?
That's correct. We have 6 sanding routes now that we've looked at expanding that, or not expanding it, but dividing that into 7 routes, with the 7th route being the area encompassing the source water protection area for the 2 wells, the Barrows and the Browns Crossing. And yeah, I think in the future, we want to look at perhaps being even more aggressive in trying to reduce the salt in that 7th route, that source water protection area route. But we really feel that that's, maybe a year or 2 away from doing that.
Okay, yeah, everything else, to the layperson seems to make sense. And just to reiterate, I think, a couple of comments that were made at the last meeting, that just intuitively, we recognize the need to do this and to at least take a good look at it. And obviously, we're not at the expense of public safety. And
Absolutely.
So I think it's helpful that we do this in a phased approach, and be comfortable that we're not sacrificing or compromising the public safety in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Judy?
Certainly in looking over the proposal, certainly appreciate all of it at a summary level. There is some notation here about the involvement of state highways, and can you comment a little bit about your integrated communication with the state relative to this topic? And also, too, from a possible awareness standpoint, is there any sort of markings or signage that delineates where that zoned areas of relative to the wells, so that people that are in the trucks, if you will, are aware that these are zones that have been identified as needing to be a reduced salt area?
Well, the last issue on delineating this area, with the plan that we're proposing now for a townwide approach, a consistent townwide approach, we won't be doing that. If we decide to break out that 7th route and do something even more aggressively, as I mentioned, then we would need to do that. There's going to be some. We've already set up some training for the guys next week. This is going to be. It's really the same basic equipment. They've dealt with liquids before. We've even used this material before, as I mentioned. But we really want to train our people so they understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and bring them on board early on. As far as working with the state, I know Shelley has sent a letter that the board, I believe, was copied on last time, to try to get them on board to doing something. The EPA study identified the state as the majority of the problem, almost 70% of the problem with state highways, particularly 93. So we'll work with Shelley, and
they've acknowledged the receipt of our letter, and they're still gathering some more information from Doug Heath from EPA right now. So I've been in touch with our contact person at Mass Highway.
So I think the plan, obviously is very clearly articulated as phases and all the intentions in the training, and I think that's great. I just wanted, just for a point of information for this board and also for the public, just that it's a 2-prong approach in terms of managing our Wilmington roads, but also at the same time being very aware and cognizant of future development with the state and the progress that you've done. I do want to say thank you as well, where, I think the town of Wilmington, your department does a fantastic job in keeping the roads safe, and I certainly think they stand out among other communities just how well they are treated and maintained during inclement weather and beyond. And certainly I know at the same time wanting to maintain the health of our residents is certainly paramount to that, but also keeping them safe while they're driving. So I do appreciate the delicate balance that you need to achieve. So thank you.
Yeah, I was going to make the same observation in that you pick any winter and drive the streets of Wilmington, and then drive over a border in any direction. And I don't want to throw any one community under the bus here, but you can notice the change, and I mean that in the most positive of manners. You guys scrape down to the pavement and keep us safe, and sometimes I can't say exactly the same of our neighbors, so thank you for that. In your conclusion paragraph, you don't have to read it verbatim, but you say something to the effect of, there's an increase in snow and ice expenditures, so it's going to cost a little bit more to do this with your plan, but your hope is that there will be a 30% reduction in the use of salt overall. Mm-hmm. So will the reduction result in savings, or hopefully a net even, kind of a wash, if you will, or is your expectation of the increase in expenditures, has that already taken into account your anticipated reduction in use?
It's taking into account what we anticipate we'll spend for salt and this material. Mm-hmm. This material is quite a bit more expensive per weight than salt. It's one of the reasons why most towns use a lot of salt. It's relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Although it's not, $56 a ton. It's not really that cheap. But
I'm of the mind personally that if we can realize a 30% reduction in the use of road salt, that the dollars we're talking about it's money well spent. It's a good investment. So thank you for that. I guess I have a couple questions here. Ms. Newhouse, maybe you can help, and if you can't, that's okay. But can you tell us a little bit about what the presence of salt in the water? And I don't know who the right person to answer this is. We got the report that illustrated that there were elevated levels of salt in our water. The water was testing with that. What is there like short-term harm that can come to consuming this salt? Is there long-term harm? Is there a reason for us to be concerned? Obviously, there's enough concern that we're taking action here, but should residents be, oh no, I gotta start filtering my water or going buying bottled water? I want to assuage any concerns people may have. So I don't know if you want to talk to that at all.
Well, I think from a public health standpoint, heart disease is the #1 killer in this country, and that can be attributed to hypertension, high blood pressure. So those on a reduced salt diet should be aware that Wilmington does have higher levels of sodium in their water than other potential sources of drinking water. So with that, we just like to make the public aware that they should be limiting their consumption of drinking water with high levels of sodium in it. So anything that we can do from public health to get that out there will only help. And looking at our water supply over the past 20 years, our levels of sodium have risen. So it's only really a concern to those on a restricted sodium diet. But you can, it's good to remember too that sodium you can get that from all different sources in your diet. So this is just one way that we can do our part in helping curb those high levels.
And I'll direct this question to Mr. Woods. I had alluded to the question when we first brought this up at our last meeting. Do we actively treat the water for the presence of salt, or is there a treatment process that's available to you and to communities to sort of bring down the salinity of water? And maybe as a follow-up question to that, are there filtration systems, Brita type of things that homeowners, residents can use that will help take some of that salinity out of the water? What can we do? What are we doing?
Unfortunately, there's no easy way to remove sodium from the water supply. You can distill it or reverse osmosis. Those are the only two filtering processes that would actually reduce sodium. To do it on a large scale in the amounts of water that we do, the cost would be astronomical. Mm-hmm. But anyone that wanted, that did have health risks that Shelley spoke about, they could put in a small unit in their kitchen faucet or something like that and reduce the salt.
Okay, so there are some things that can at least take down some.
Your Brita filters and these various things, no. And bottled water, some of them have higher sodium than the town's drinking water, so.
That's the concern I have with these bottled water programs. You think you're getting this great water, and who knows where you're really getting it from.
They want to sell more water, so they make it taste good, and to do that, you add various minerals, sodium, chloride, salt, makes French fries taste good, everything that soup, orange juice, whatever it is that you want to consume. So there is some significant amounts of sodium in those products.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you all. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, very good. Again, thanks for coming here tonight and answering some questions and some concerns of the board and the residents. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good luck this winter.
Thank you.
Yes.
Maybe it won't snow.
Are they outside waiting?
I think so.
Yeah.
Chuck, I think they're out there.
Our 7:30 appointment is with Michael Webster from GeoInsight, James DiLorenzo, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and Joseph Coyne, Department of Environmental Protection, but project status update pertaining to activities taking place in conjunction with the Olin Chemical Superfund Site, 51 Ames Street. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
This is what you sent me?
Yes.
Sure.
These are copies of the same figures that the board has on printout for the audience's benefit.
The board just didn't receive, is this the same thing that you're talking about with your emails earlier, this two-page doc? Let's make sure we have the same. That's what you sent us.
No, okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing we received.
Okay. There are two figures the board should follow.
Thank you, sir.
So what I'd like to do is just provide 5-minute to 10-minute overview. I'll start with a general status update and then focus on the issue of the private well monitoring, which a lot of work has occurred over the past several months that I think is important. Right now we are in the second year of field investigations for the Superfund study. The field work began in the fall of 2009, and a significant amount of the field work, basically the data collection across all the various media has been completed at this point. So a lot of data has been provided by Olin, but we still need to review the quality of that data. We still need to tie everything together, and that's going to be a significant effort. There's a lot of data. There were approximately 200 soil samples collected, over 215 individual chemical compounds looked at across the site, over 130 monitoring wells across the study area, and numerous sediment and surface water samples from various on-site and off-site tributaries. So a lot of data collection has happened over the past couple of years. And this is really the first time, even though this site has had a long history of study, it's really the first time that there'll be a comprehensive look at all the potential chemicals that could be impacting the environment out there. So it's really a new effort. Again, there's a lot of data, and we're starting to go through those piles of data now. There's also a pilot study that's been on the table for a while. One of the primary concerns out at the site are these areas. And if you look at this figure in your handout, there are these areas that show up as yellow on that printout. And those are areas of what we call dense aqueous phase liquid. It's basically just a fancy way of saying that they're concentrated areas of contamination that sit at the bottom of the aquifer on top of the bedrock. Really, these yellow areas represent the highest concentrations of contamination. And part of the effort moving forward beyond, further characterizing that, the extent of that problem, is to install a pilot extraction well on a privately owned property along Jewel Drive, right in this area, and look at how effective various pumping scenarios are on removing that material. We call it a pilot study because the results of that information will be fed into looking at final cleanup solutions for the site. It's pretty obvious that removing the dense aqueous areas, it's likely that would be, part of the cleanup solution. So having this extraction well and having the data from that will be important, because it's not like pumping regular groundwater. The physical and chemical properties of this DAPL material are very different than typical groundwater. It's denser than groundwater. It's very acidic, and then of course there's numerous elevated levels of chemicals, including the N-nitrosodimethylamine. So having an actual pump test will prove very important in coming up with a final cleanup solution, basically setting the pumping rate, et cetera. Beyond that, again, there are, if you look on this other figure that you have in your handout, there are, and I don't expect you to look at all the data on there. I know you can't even read it on those 8.5 by 11s, but just focus on the fact that there are dots everywhere throughout, throughout the entire area. The site is down in this area, and Maple Meadow Brook up in this area. Here's Chestnut, here's Butters Row, Main Street. There are approximately 130 monitoring wells throughout that area, some screened in the shallow aquifers, some screened in rock. So there's a good density of monitoring wells throughout the study area, is the point I want this figure to convey. And many of those monitoring wells have been sampled for an extensive list of analytes, some for a shorter list, but most for an extensive list, all for NDMA. But one area that is of concern still and needs to be characterized is up along Main Street. Folks may be familiar with where the Town Park property is and where Butters Row intersects with Main Street, and there's a large wetland area. There's concern that the contaminated groundwater may be flowing underneath that area and moving under Main Street. So that area still needs to be characterized, and there's a proposal to put in several well clusters in that area to do that. A secondary area that may be of concern, we're not sure yet, is down towards the Woburn Town line, along the east ditch where it transitions to the new Boston Drainage Way in Woburn. So that's kind of just a very, very brief overview of the overall site status. There'll be a much more comprehensive presentation at a November 30th public meeting EPA is hosting at the middle school. But I wanted to provide that just to frame the discussion on the private well effort. So there's, again, a fairly long history of private well sampling. Private wells are, and again, if you refer back to this figure, the site property being where the, right in this area here. There are two areas of private wells, down along Cook Ave, down to Border Avenue, towards the city of Woburn, and then a secondary area to the north and west of Maple Meadow Brook, along Chestnut Street, between Hillside Way and Mill Road. And those are the two areas that have been focused on under the Superfund program. Prior to the Superfund program, Olin had sampled private wells going all the way back to 1990, but those samples only looked at compounds that really aren't of concern at this point. Now we know NDMA is of concern. NDMA was first sampled in the private wells in 2003 along Cook Avenue only, and it wasn't detected. Olin repeated that sampling in 2005, and NDMA was not detected again. The site was placed on the Superfund list in 2006. In 2008, in the fall of 2008, we required Olin to again sample the private wells. At that point, they detected NDMA in 2 private wells on Cook Avenue. They were both wells that had previously not shown any concentrations of NDMA. So we immediately became concerned about that. The levels weren't very high, but they were detected. That led to additional sampling in the Cook Ave neighborhood, and then also led to sampling in this northwest area of town. Since that time, since the fall of 2008, there are about 12 wells that have been sampled at a frequency of about every 3 months. 11 of those wells are potable or drinking water supply wells. A 12th one is an irrigation well only, but provided an opportunity for sampling. And so since that time, we have learned that 8 of the 12 wells have had at least one detection of NDMA in it. And again, referencing back to this figure, and I do think you can read the boxes in the printouts you have, moving from the bottom up provides the NDMA results, older to most recent on the top. Anything that is listed as ND means non-detect. And so you can, in a few moments' time, find the wells that have had a sporadic hit along the way, a sporadic detection. The 2 wells that have been most concerning remain on Cook Avenue. They remain the 2 wells that first had the NDMA detections in the fall of 2008. There are these 2 boxes on this side of the figure. And you can see there have been multiple detections in each well, with detected concentrations ranging from 4.1 to 31 nanograms per liter. We measure NDMA in nanograms per liter or parts per trillion. So they're pretty low concentrations. So what does this all mean? Well, there aren't any federal or state drinking water standards for NDMA. There are simply no standards on the books anywhere. Mass DEP has a 10 nanogram per liter reporting limit, but that's not a health-based standard. It's simply a reporting limit, probably based on a outdated method detection limit at the time. So really it has no bearing on what EPA is doing here. We're interested in health-based standards. So with a lack of health-based standards, EPA is left with taking the results as they come in and quantifying potential exposure risks. It's a very conservative way that EPA looks at potential health concerns. And the way it works is whenever we receive a positive NDMA detection or other chemical, and there have been a few sporadic other chemicals detected in these wells, but none have even come close to being at a health concern level. When we look at the NDMA, we assume a person is drinking 2.5 liters a day for 50 weeks a year for 70 years. We call that an excess lifetime risk exposure scenario. And so I think most people would agree that's fairly conservative, 2.5 liters a day, every day for 50 weeks out of a year for 70 years. And we take the results of that and we estimate potential cancer risk. So NDMA is a class B2 carcinogen, potential carcinogen. And so the concern is there an increased cancer risk from continued exposure to NDMA? And the way EPA looks at that is that, EPA has to recognize that, everyone has exposure to cancer. What folks may not know is that NDMA is fairly prevalent in the environment. It's in a lot of the food supply. It's in things like deli meats, hot dogs, beer, that sort of thing. So NDMA is out there. So in reality, most of us probably have been exposed to NDMA and continue to be. And that's not unusual when EPA looks at chemical exposures, and EPA can't control that. Our task under Superfund is to look at what additional exposure could people be having from these concentrations in these wells, and that's what we quantify. We calculate a number Our risk assessors look at that number, and we can then decide if action is warranted. And we express those results as a 1 in 10,000 to 1 in a million increased chance of getting cancer. So we all have a chance of getting cancer. It's probably, a much higher number. It's definitely a much higher number. The question is, are folks' exposure, greater than 1 in 10,000 because of this additional? And from a regulatory standpoint, that's what EPA can act on. And that number, depending on how you calculate it, and there are a few different ways, is somewhere around 30 nanograms per liter, if you want to look at it in a more simple manner. So somewhere around 30 is the trigger, and it's not a hard number, but it's around that number. We've had one sample at or slightly above that number at 31. The rest remain below that number. But because we did have one, this sample right here was at 31. That was last year. We required Olin to offer both of these families bottled water as a precaution. Now, the good news with NDMA at these levels is that it's really an ingestion exposure problem. The only route for exposure is ingestion. Some chemicals can also be absorbed through the skin or can also be inhaled. They're volatile and you can inhale them. That's not the case with NDMA. It won't absorb to the skin readily. It doesn't break down into the air, so you don't inhale it readily. So if you provide someone with bottled water, it's a good temporary solution. They can still shower with their water. They can still bathe with it, but really they can't drink it, or we recommend they don't drink it. So 2 families have been provided bottled water as a temporary solution. Olin so that's where we're at right now. And so 2 families on Cook Ave are on bottled water. Olin continues to sample 12 wells across the study area. We more recently, working with the town's health agent, reached out to other folks in this area because we were getting detections of around 5.6, 5.8 on Hillside Way, which represented kind of a new area of concern. The concern had always been focused on Cook Ave. Then we had this one show up on Hillside Way. So working with the health agent, we sent out surveys to about 40 families to try to identify who has active wells in that area of town, both irrigation and drinking water wells, obviously with more concern towards the drinking water wells. From that information, we identified that there are about 20 active wells in that part of town that weren't being sampled. As a first step, Olin went out and sampled 7 of those wells, ranging from Mill Road in the northwest end down to the Burlington town line along Chestnut to the southern end of that area of concern. Those results have come back all non-detect. Those were taken in early October. That's just preliminary data. The final data, still needs to be reviewed and needs to be released to the owners. But it looks like, at this point, NDMA wasn't detected in those 7 additional wells. But again, that's just one sample event. We still need to continue sampling. So moving forward with regard to the private wells, there are really 3 to-dos, if you want to think of it that way. We're going to continue to provide bottled water to the 2 families as a precaution. We're going to continue to require Olin to monitor wells on a quarterly frequency. And we have required them to begin a study to look at permanent solutions for homes that have been impacted by NDMA. In other words, we recognize that bottled water is just a temporary solution. The question is the best approach in the long term to provide a tie-in to the municipal water supply for folks where it's available, or is there a better treatment option in the home? A treatment system you could put in the home that would be effective. And really the question is the treatment system. I mean, we know, you can tie people in, but there are, costs associated with that. And, it's really a question of, is there a better treatment solution that should be put forth? And so that study is underway now, should take just a few months to complete. At the end of that, it'll be open up to the public for review and comment before EPA decides on a future direction. And again, just to reiterate though, right now, we're not quite at the threshold with really, maybe one well in terms of really pulling the trigger on action. So if these concentrations remain where they are or decrease, there may not be any further action for the private wells beyond continuing to monitor them. If the levels increase, we will have a plan of action in place, and that's the idea here. I think that's all I wanted to say, and then I'd be happy to answer questions.
That's a great presentation, very informative. I just have a quick, easy question. You said it's a good density of wells. For that size area, is that the average density, or is perhaps, because you kind of have it narrowed down when you look at the...
Yeah.
Except for a couple of blips over here.
Right. I mean, there's no hard, fast, number of wells per acre, for example. It's really, really varies depending on the scope of the problem and the geologic, hydraulic setting of the sites. But here I would say, just to give you a straight answer, that with regard to shallow wells, excellent coverage. With regard to bedrock, we required them, and they recently put in 6 bedrock wells. I think we need a few more. The 2 that are going to be put in will be both up along Main Street, will be both shallow and bedrock. The reason why I'm concerned about bedrock is all of these wells, all the private wells, are deep in the bedrock. They're all between 300 and 800 feet deep, based on survey information that residents were kind enough to provide us. And that indicates to me that, obviously the NDMA is in the fractures, and we need to have a better understanding of how contamination is moving through the fractures. So I would say with regard to the bedrock, we probably need a little more work.
Very good. Thank you.
Mike Webster is also here from GeoInsight.
Mike Webster, is that GeoInsight? Did you want to say a few words?
No, I think what I will say is that that we've been working collaboratively with EPA on this one, reviewing the work plans, the data that they have, and have been providing comments on behalf of the town. And to date, Jim and EPA has pretty much taken most of those comments and incorporated them into the documents that they've asked Olin to resubmit. So we are right behind them as far as looking at the information and providing comments as it relates to how it's going to impact the residents in town.
Very good. And thank you for being here. Any questions or comments from the board?
For Mr. Di Lorenzo, you had talked about the extraction well that will be installed, I guess is the right word, will be installed in order to do some pumping tests. So I just thought it bears repeating, and just to make sure that I understand it correctly, the whole idea of that is not literally to extract any of the DAPL from the ground. It's to conduct tests to figure out and evaluate the best alternative on the ultimate remediation of that aqueous layer, right, that dense aqueous layer.
Right, I mean, there will be DAPL extracted. It's an extraction well, but it's not, the goal isn't to remove all of the DAPL. The goal is to evaluate the optimal pumping rate and see how it behaves under different pumping rates.
Gotcha.
So that we can develop a way to get, I forget the number, but I think the last number I saw was an estimated 25 million gallons of DAPL, and this is going to pump a few thousand gallons over the course of the study. And then it'll provide hopefully a permanent well down the road, and then we'll need more. This will help determine how many more and where we can put them down the road.
And how does that work with other monitoring wells that are already installed? In other words, when you conduct these tests and you extract some of the materials that are way down on top of the bedrock, that data is used in connection with data from other monitoring wells to see how the layer may have moved around, or is that a different piece of the work?
No, that's right. It's used in conjunction with some existing monitoring wells that are already on this Jewel Drive property, and then as part of this study, they're installing 4 additional monitoring wells with the sole purpose of evaluating the effectiveness of the pumping. Okay. So there's really 5 wells being put in on that property, and then as this material is removed, it'll be trucked off site for disposal at this point.
Okay. And I know that any time that I've been to one of the forums that much like the one that'll be held on November 30th, you go through the history of EPA's involvement and how this site has evolved and how the oversight of this particular site has evolved, and I'm certainly not asking you to go through that here. But I know as a selectman, one of the questions I often get is, how are they going to clean it up? And I find myself in this explanation that's, well, the process takes a long time, and I give them the best summary of where we are in the process right now. And so I think that the extraction wells that you're talking about really speaks to the process of getting to the answer to the question that everybody has is, how's it going to be cleaned up? So
That's right.
that's why I raised the question again, and hope that we get that same kind of information. I know we will on November 30th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Judy?
No, I'm great. Between this presentation and our previous meeting that we attended, a lot of the questions were answered, and certainly do appreciate you being here tonight, and look forward to hearing more at the November 30th meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, I noticed that the two residences that had the elevated levels of NDMA are close to these DAPL concentration areas, as are a number of other residences, but these two specifically are. Is the belief that the NDMA concentrations reside in this DAPL stuff that we hope at some point we can get out of there?
Yeah, the highest, the concentrations, the DAPL persists the highest concentrations are in the DAPL area.
Okay.
To provide a comparison, in DAPL we see concentrations over 20,000 nanograms per liter, 20,000 nanograms per liter. In groundwater we see typical concentrations under 100. And then in the private wells we've seen typically single to double digits.
All right.
So yeah, so really you have to get at the DAPL to remediate the overall groundwater. It's an ongoing source.
Well, thank you.
To the groundwater.
You anticipated my next question, which is we start to see trace evidence coming up in wells that are far from the DAPL concentration areas, and you said that it seems like that's evidence that the water is or the NDMA is traveling with water in cracks and fissures out to these sort of more remote locations. That's right. Can we assume from that that at some point, if the pilot well performs well and you are able to get good data from that, that if we can, at some point, hopefully sooner than later, evolve to a place where we can put removal wells in, that these trace elements or these trace detections further out will start to be minimized or maybe even go away by virtue of the fact that the high concentration is now off-site?
Well, and that's obviously our objective, as the other gentleman mentioned. In order to have that answer, I think we need a better understanding of the bedrock fractures, their orientation, how they're interconnected. And I have, obviously, based on this data and everything we've seen, I have reason to believe that, the DAPL, which sits on top of bedrock, bits and pieces of it are leaching into the rock fractures. And it's certain fractures that are intersecting that are showing up in these wells that are several hundred feet down. And it's probably being pulled along by the action of pumping these wells. Even though they're only private wells, they're still putting a head on the fracture and pulling a little bit. So in order to get a real good understanding of that, I think we need more work needs to be done in bedrock to try to answer that. And it's very difficult to tie an actual fracture thousands of feet away to a source area. So we may never have a very good answer on that. But theoretically, I don't see any other source for the NDMA concentrations than these DAPL areas. It makes sense conceptually that that's where it's coming from. I'm not aware of any other sources of NDMA, and that would be the goal.
Maybe it's a ridiculous suggestion or a question, but is there let's assume you take out the DAPL and you get as much of it out as you can, but maybe you can't get every single little element out. Is there treatment that can be put down in its place that can minimize its danger to sort of offset what it does?
Yeah, I mean, that will be part of the evaluation of cleanup options. There'll be, so the only solution here isn't just to pump the material out. There may be other solutions of in situ treatment or some combination thereof. be, because there's fairly extensive DAPL areas. And in fact, these DAPL areas are based on what Olin characterized in 2005. We'll be updating these based on EPA study. The same with this red line.
Yeah.
If you follow that red line, that was the extent of DAPL in 2005. Now, these private wells are well beyond that, so it's continuing to evolve. There may be even more DAPL areas. So we may need to be smarter than just trying to pump it out of the ground.
Not to mention all the questions of the water flow by virtue of the fact we're not pulling water from that area anymore, and some of the other concerns. And I know you're observing all that as well. So.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's educational for me, and I appreciate you keeping your eye on the ball and working towards the hopeful solution to this problem here in our town. Thank you all.
Thanks. Are there any public questions pertaining to this presentation? Mr. O'Reilly?
Jerry O'Reilly, Wildwood Street. There's a deep rock well 350 feet down in the area of Adams Street, which is probably 2,000 or 3,000 feet from there, and contaminated with NTBE. Shell Oil took responsibility for it, and it was kept. Any possibility of those being connected? The Olin area and the Adams Street area.
Different, completely different.
It was 350 feet down.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and that type of release wouldn't have NDMA.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't even.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen MBTE show up in a couple of the wells, and we don't believe that came from Olin. We believe it came from somewhere else.
I think the Water Department and the Board of Health have the information on that particular well.
Right.
And they may want to share it with you. Right. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. Mr. Lingenfelter?
Lower Congress Street. My question is the same one I've had since back in the early 2000s, and we're going to hear it November 30th. Any predicted schedule on the pump test?
They started putting in, so one of the major issues to starting the pump test is the fact that it's on private property, and negotiating access, which EPA wasn't involved with. That's something that Olin Corporation, it was a private party negotiation between the private property owner at 8 Jewel Drive and Olin Corporation. That took a while for them to work through. That was signed last December. Last summer, they went out and started putting in the monitoring wells. Ran into a few unexpected surprises with regard to the elevation of bedrock. Have made some design changes, and they're supposed to be going back out to put in the extraction well and begin constructing the pipeline in December next month. Probably take 3-4 months to construct, and then we expect the pilot to operate 9 to 12 months, but it could, it'll depend on the data we see.
Maybe in the spring then, is that?
I'm hopeful that this will be running by the spring, summer at the latest.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this specific presentation, Mr. McDonald?
Will we be able to ask public comments at the end of the meeting, if we speak now?
Yes, Mr. McDonald.
Okay, so you're not pumping water anymore for wells, and so I would imagine that the water is rising or the water tables are rising. And some people have mentioned concerns about other communities or other people downstream where this could be spreading and affecting other people. Number one, is your ultimate goal to get the Olin site developed? Number two, is there any type of filtration system where wells could be pumped and put through a filtration system so that the NDMA is filtered out so that we could send the water downstream and keep the water table from rising so that it doesn't become more disastrous?
The first question, I apologize, what was the first question?
Okay, so is your ultimate...
Oh, the development, no, I'm sorry, EPA's ultimate objective is to remediate the site. We have no interest in how it's developed. We understand that the owner is Olin Corporation. They own the title to the property, that they have been pursuing redevelopment options, but that's something that EPA's involvement in any redevelopment of the property is with regard to making sure that folks who would work or visit the property in the future aren't exposed to any remaining residual chemicals. But our objective isn't to redevelop the property, it's to remediate it so that it's safe for use.
So it could be developed or just safe for use?
So, so it could be. It would be cleaned up to industrial standards, is the way that a site like this would work.
Well, one of the problems that I have when people talk about remediation is I see, for lack of a better analogy, a Band-Aid being put on a broken leg. Some of these places like in Woburn, they just get capped off. And it seemed to me that there could be a better way. And just if you could address the other question about filtration systems that could filter out the NDMA so that we could be sending water downstream without MDA so that we don't have this problem just getting worse.
Right, you're talking about the elevated water in Maple Meadow Brook now?
Yeah, for example, the wells that have been pumped to be used for drinking water, okay, they're shut down.
Right.
Okay, causing the water to rise. Now, that's a problem, I would imagine. So to alleviate that problem, is there some type of industrial filtration system that the water could still be pumped through that filtration system, take out the NDMA, and send the water downstream so that the water tables aren't rising?
Yeah, actually, that's not something we had looked at. But to answer the question, there's no filtering technology for NDMA. There is commercial treatment technology out there that would work on the NDMA, but there are also all these other chemicals that are co-located with the NDMA. So we've focused the discussion here tonight on the NDMA, but there's also a series of other chemicals in that water. So it would be, any type of treatment would be pretty costly. It wouldn't be a simple filtering effort, and certainly that'll be looked at for remediation. But to look at that type of treatment to lower the water table isn't something we had had planned on doing. But we do plan on doing that as part of the remediation.
Okay, I know that distilleries and that sort of thing, or desalinization plants, they're separating water and taking the water out that way. And of course it would be expensive, but I would imagine that what you're doing and investigating it, engineering and other things that are involved with costs. I was wondering if you guys have ever considered taking a look at maybe doing something like that.
No, I'm certainly aware that the water level has risen out there. I can see it when I'm out there, and one would expect that when you stop pumping millions of gallons of water every day, you're going to raise the water table. It's the first I've heard of it being a problem, so we hadn't really considered that. But let me think about that and see if it's something. But my gut reaction is there's not an easy way to treat this groundwater. Doesn't mean that it won't be done, and we're going to push for that, for cleaning it up. But to take it to that level, to lower the water table, would be hard to do.
I just hear of some extreme situations where places actually take sewage water, treat it, and turn it back into drinking water.
Right.
So if they could do it for that, why couldn't they do it for this?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Great presentation. We'll see you on the 30th.
Thank you.
Thank you. You good to go? Communications.
Mr. Chairman, as you just mentioned, the public information meeting on the Olin Superfund site, which will be held in conjunction with the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, will be held specifically to discuss the ongoing remedial investigation of the site on November 30th at 7 p.m. at the Wilmington Middle School auditorium. Representatives from Olin Corporation will also be there, along with representatives from the town and Geo Insight, as well as the two agencies, both federal and state, that were just mentioned. Provide the board with a memorandum relative to the one-time aid that has been made available to the town via the supplemental state budget. On October 31st, the town received $152,073 in a one-time local aid distribution. The board will recall that during the fiscal year 2012 state budget development process, $65 million of unrestricted general government aid was withheld because of concerns of a revenue shortfall. Because sufficient state tax revenues became available, the state restored that portion of the revenues previously withheld from cities and towns. The distribution of these supplemental funds means that the town's fiscal year 2012 unrestricted general government local aid account will be funded at fiscal year 2011 levels. So this is essentially level funding us in this account to last year's number. We had been reduced by the $152,000, and essentially the Department of, or the legislature and the governor had promised to make everybody whole if in fact revenues came in better than expected. They did, and they kept their promise through a supplemental budget. And so the town, unless the town appropriates funds from this particular source, which of course would require town meeting action, the remaining funds, or those not appropriated or not used, would be closed to free cash. And I provided a spreadsheet to the board outlining just where this local aid distribution has been since fiscal year 2009. The board has received notification of our free cash approval from the Department of Revenue's Division of Local Services. The Director of Accounts, Gerard Perry, has written to us indicating that based upon the unaudited balance sheet submitted, that he certifies that the amount of available funds or free cash as of July 1, 2011 for the town of Wilmington is $9,491,810. This is obviously a very a good number for the town, in that it is indicative of the town's financial position. The free cash number actually has gone up from last year by just over $2.8 million. It is the largest free cash number that in the town's history, and it will put us in good stead as we go forward with major projects that have been identified for the town. So this was certainly good news for Wilmington.
The free cash coming in for the 2012 that you just read a moment ago, that's not involved in this notification of approval, correct? That's for the next fiscal year?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, from the one-time aid? Yes,
right.
That is correct. That's not calculated at all in this number.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Would want to give notice that we've already published this as legal notice, but the Board of Selectmen will have a public hearing to provide an open forum for the discussion of the local property tax policy with reference to classification for fiscal year 2012 taxation purposes next Monday, November 28th, here at Town Hall at 7:15 p.m. Interested taxpayers may present their views on classification policy at the hearing or in writing to the town manager's office up until 4:30 on that date. At that meeting, the principal assessor, Mr. Moynihan, will be present and will provide you with an overview of the anticipated property taxes for fiscal year 2012, and it will be the Board of Selectmen's determination on classification that drives the ultimate number.
It's 2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks from tonight, yes. The board has correspondence from Joan Butler, who is the Executive Director of Minuteman Senior Services, regarding the fiscal year 2011 service report. It is actually a copy of the letter that was sent to Terry Marciello, the Director of the Department of Elderly Services. and it indicates that senior services from Minutemen were provided to 1,535 residents in Wilmington, and they estimate that the total value of services is in excess of $700,000. The town's local assessment for services in fiscal year 2012 is $4,430, and it's based on recent federal census figures. So that's information that we wanted to provide to the board, and those services are provided in a variety of different ways, including in-home care, caregiver support, protective services, Meals on Wheels, senior dining, various counseling programs, etc. The board has a memorandum from Paul Regan, the Executive Director of the MBTA Advisory Board, and Mark Drayson, the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, providing you with the results of the municipal elections of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. The results were certified on October 26th, and the new members, all chief elected officials from various communities, will serve on the Boston Region MPO effective November 1st. And they are Newton Mayor Seti D. Warren, Everett Mayor Carlo Di Maria, Arlington Selectman Clarissa Rowe, Lexington Selectman Hank Manns, Medway Selectman Richard Dunn, Norwood Selectman Michael Lyons, Beverly Mayor William Scanlon, and Woburn Mayor Scott Gallivan. The board has received a letter from Jane Lyman of Comcast and Xfinity regarding price adjustments. She's indicated that there have been some price adjustments made relative to field collection charges, to what they call a convenience fee for the agent, which is a payment made by phone with a customer care representative, for a signal amplifier, and also for reprints of any bills. These particular increases go into effect on January 1st, 2012, and all of the Comcast Xfinity customers will or have been notified of the changes. Mr. Chairman, the board is being asked to consider December 2011 and January 2012 meeting schedule. Over the past few years, what you have considered was the one meeting in December, with the understanding that if there needed to be an additional meeting, that it would be scheduled. And in the past, you have gone with the second Monday in December. In this case would be December 12th, because the fourth Monday typically falls around the Christmas holiday, in this case the day after, on the 26th. And then the January meetings, I would recommend that we continue the practice of having two meetings, but have them on the second Monday in January, and then on the last Monday in January, which would be the budget presentation meeting. And then again, if there was a need for additional meetings, they could be scheduled. So I don't have the January calendar
I think the first
in
is at
front of me. The 9th, January 9th would be the first meeting in January, thank you. And January 30th would be the second meeting, which would also be the meeting for the fiscal year 2013 budget presentation.
Any questions on that or input on that? And would we go with those dates? We got the 12th of December, and the 1st and the, not the 1st, the 9th.
Yeah, the 30th.
12, 12, 1, 9, 130, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, good with everybody here?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
no objection.
We don't need a motion or anything, right?
No, it's fine. The only other item I wanted to mention, Mr. Chairman, before you go to the next piece of business, was that we still do have some flu vaccine available. If anybody is still interested, any resident of Wilmington is still interested in obtaining a flu shot, they can contact the public health nurse's office, and they will make arrangements for you to come in to the office, and they will be able to give you that vaccine. So if anybody is still looking for a flu shot. The flu season is fast approaching. There's still time. It still would be effective. Please call the town hall and ask for the public health nurse or the Board of Health office, and either the Board of Health office or the public health nurse will be able to make those arrangements. Thank you, Mr.
Very
Chairman.
good, thank you. Any public comments? You understand the rules right there. Mr. McDonald, 5 minutes.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Newhouse for changing the rules, and just want to say that I admire somebody when he wants to do things more effectively. And I actually wanted to be more effective, and what I decided since last meeting, we didn't have an official timer. I brought an official timer.
Mr. McDonald, I've asked you not to make a joke of our meeting
Well, I'm
here.
not making a joke.
No,
I'm serious.
There's a clock right there. I'm serious too. Do you have
Okay.
a question?
Yes, I actually wrote them down. I have questions for you guys, and I'll read them to you. And you said I got to stand in front of my seat. So this one's from Mr. Kara, and I'll ask all my questions first, and you guys could respond to me so I don't use up my time. Town Manager Kara, you are on the High School Building Committee. You're proposing the town of Wilmington taxpayers be forced to pay more in taxes even if they can't afford to. This to pay for a problematic high school proposal. How can you justify asking the taxpayers to believe that a 192,443 square foot building should cost $83,700,000 when a massive development in Woburn, Trade Center Park at 100 Sylvan Road, across the highway from the Woburn Showcase Cinema, with over 1 million square feet, has a cost of $47,615,669. So that's your question, Mr. Kara.
Okay,
And the next
he's
one's,
going to answer that right now, Mr. McDonald.
Okay, then.
We've gone through this for weeks.
Well, what I'm saying is, what do we do about the 5 minutes? That's all. What do we do about my 5 minutes?
What I'm saying is, we've gone through this ad nauseum with you, okay?
We don't want to make anybody nauseous. That's why I'm praising Mr. Newhouse for changing this.
Okay. You have a question up there, Mr. Kyra's going to answer it right now.
Okay. I got one for you.
Well, first of all, I'm not forcing anybody to pay more taxes. What we're doing, by virtue of the vote of the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, the high school building committee, and certainly I support the construction of a new Wilmington High School project, is that people will have an opportunity to vote on December 6th. If they want to pay for the project, they can vote on December 10th, and if they approve, both at the ballot box and at the town meeting, it'll be their decision to construct the new high school. It won't be something that I force on anybody or anybody else forces on anybody. This is a democracy, and people have the right to vote however they please. So the adjective forced, which is used as an adjective in this case, I suppose, or maybe as a verb, is not accurate, Mr. McDonald. There has been a proposal made, and it'll be up to the voters to decide whether to fund that. In terms of the building cost and the ultimate cost to taxpayers, which we estimate to be $164 for the average taxpayer over the period of 25 years. I'm not familiar with how the Trade Center Park was built. I do know that these numbers have to do with prevailing wage. I'm not sure that a trade park has the same type of restrictions as the town of Wilmington. If they built a facility over 1 million square feet at a cost of $47 million, then better luck to them. The numbers that we have presented are numbers that are relatively typical of what a high school in Massachusetts cost. I can tell you that I've looked at other states in terms of the cost for high schools. And you can build a school in another state. You can build a school in New Hampshire for less than it cost to build in the town of Wilmington or any place in Massachusetts. And the reason is because of prevailing wage. And so we have to live by the rules that are established in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think the project that we have before the board and before the townspeople is a good project. I don't think we need to debate it now, but there will be a high school building committee meeting on the 17th, and there's also a finance committee public hearing on the 21st, and ultimately there is the biggest hearing of all, and that's December 6th at the ballot box and December 10th at town meeting, and people will be free to make their own choice.
So just a clarification, the people who can't afford to have their taxes go up, who vote no, will not have their taxes go up? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that, and you know I'm not saying that. That's just not the way it works. If people vote for one president and not the other, that doesn't mean that they don't have a president, you know. And if people go to a town meeting and they vote as they did for a feasibility study by the vote of 210 or 212 to 1, or as they voted when they voted for the middle school by 700 and something to 3, it doesn't mean that the 1 or the 3 does not have obligations and responsibility for the payment of taxes.
So they will be forced to pay higher taxes if they cannot afford
All right,
to.
Mr. McDonald,
All right,
no, we're done, you're done, your 5 minutes is up.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is, Mr. McDonald.
No, it's not up.
Mr.
No,
McDonald.
you're making us nauseous, Mr. Smagg. This is your question.
Mr. McDonald,
Selectman
you are
Smagg, you called a special town meeting to have a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion
Lieutenant Puba.
to pay for what is an close to $84 million.
McDonald,
What's the
again,
MWRA?
You are
I didn't use
disturbing
it.
me.
It didn't go off.
Yeah, you're done.
Why you
You're
want to disrespect Mr. Newhouse?
You're done, Mr.
Mr.
McDonald.
Newhouse gave people 5 minutes. Why you want to do that now? You don't want to answer your
Mr.
question?
McDonald, you are done this evening, sir. I've asked you to leave, you're done.
Are you afraid to
You're all
answer your
done.
question?
No, I'm afraid to just go on and on with you about the new high school. We all understand you don't like the new high school. Mr. McDonald, you're done.
Just have some legitimate
Thank you. Have a good night.
questions, Mr.
Have a good night.
What's the MWRA?
Have a good night,
what's the
Mr.
sewer cost
McDonald.
gonna be?
Have a good night, Mr. McDonald.
You don't know what the sewer cost is
Have
gonna
a
be?
good night, Mr. McDonald.
I mean, we have a sewer cost.
Mr. McDonald. Brought this to an end for you.
Listen, my 5 minutes is enough.
Yeah.
You want to be the official timekeeper?
I was watching the clock.
You started 24 past, Mr. McDonald.
You interrupted me.
The MWRA, do we?
I can tell you that the water in this town has not increased 1 cent since 2008, despite predictions by a number of folks. So the water rate has remained constant since 2008. The sewer rate has remained the same since 2010, and it is expected to stay at the same rate throughout this fiscal year. We don't anticipate having to raise the sewer rate at this point, but no final decision has been made. We are going to run a sewer as opposed to putting in a septic system, which makes little or no sense and would constrain the site. And the sewer that's being run is going to be built in conformance with the sewer master plan, which was approved by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts when we did the major study on water and wastewater.
Yeah, but you got to admit that if we have a septic system now and we're going to go on MWRA, we got additional costs going into the sewer system.
Well, I'm not going to admit to anything, Mr. McDonald, because you're the same person that indicated on several occasions that your water rates were going to skyrocket. Yet, as I'm indicating to you, and I don't know what your situation is. I don't know if you pay for water or not. I don't know, what your situation is. But for those of us who do pay a water bill, we can look at the rates and determine that the rates have not increased since 2008.
But we also had lawsuits.
Mr. McDonald,
We had lawsuits
Mr.
that went to the water department.
Mr. McDonald, I'm asking you nicely, please.
I'm just telling you, I didn't use up my 5 minutes. And Judy, I just
Mr.
wanted to
McDonald,
ask
you're
you a
done.
question.
You're done, Mr.
So
McDonald.
we're gonna have an $18,000 a year charge for people going to Essex Agricultural College. Judy, can you answer us that? Your uncle's involved with that project.
We're done here.
$18,000 a year. for
Mr.
kids
McDonald,
to go to
why are you
Essex
disrespecting the board again?
I didn't use my
Please.
5 minutes.
You did, Mr. Ball. This is not a game,
You're
please.
not an official timekeeper.
That's fine.
That's right there.
I'll remove him.
We don't know if that's calibrated properly. So, honestly.
Well, what I'm trying to tell you is that we
this
have
is-
some
this is-
very important questions to be answered. And I don't.
See you on the 17th and the
Can you
21st,
tell us
Mr.
how many
McDonald.
classrooms, Mr. Newhouse, in a new school? Can you just tell us that?
Now, what I'd like to return to, though, and I'm not eliciting any more information, but here's what's I think an important point for folks to understand. First of all, when the Board of Selectmen voted at its last meeting to change the way that public comments are entertained, it was not a further restriction of what people were able to comment on. The fact of the matter is that for 10-plus years, folks were respectfully asked that if they need direction in where to find an answer to a question, that's what public comments were limited to. Contrary to what how some people have characterized that change, the fact of the matter is that we decided as a board, because we kept running into a problem, frankly, with you, sir, and having to try and limit your conversation because you didn't have the common courtesy directed towards this board or to the general public to just limit your comments to things that were on the agenda so that the residents would understand that issues of substance that would be discussed at the meeting would be publicized ahead of time. So the whole change to public comment, while it may not have been for the best reasons, was a practical change to try and afford you, sir, a little bit more time to ask questions and to make public comment. Notwithstanding that change, that doesn't give you the right to come in here and to launch questions and innuendo at a selectman about some assessment that nobody's had the opportunity to look at or to discuss and throw out the fact that they have a family member there. There is such a thing as common courtesy. There is such a thing as decorum. There is such a thing as running a meeting in a businesslike manner, and most importantly, can't overstate this, in a way that gives everybody else in town the opportunity to know what's going to be discussed at this meeting, and this meeting of substance. If you want to talk about the high school and the merits of the high school, go to as many public hearings as you want to go to as many public meetings as you want to go to, and I know you've gone to many. You've so much as showed up at a rally for every supporter in Wilmington who wants to come down and support the high school. You show up smiling and glaring at the crowd that's there. That's your right to show up, but it's not your right to continually disrespect people. It's not your right to throw out innuendos. It's not your right to float that selectmen are taking kickbacks and they're corrupt. And what else have you thrown at the board? That we don't uphold our oath of office? Let me tell you something. What you try and pass off as freedom of, what you try and pass off as freedom of speech is nothing but harassment. What you try and pass off as democracy is anarchy. You know, in real democracy, with real freedom of speech, people don't use that as a weapon to take away everybody else's right to speak. So, you know, I understand the chairman's frustration here. You know, it might be about the timing, it might be about the manner in which you present yourself and try and impose on this board, you know, a defiant and aggressive demeanor. All of that stuff aside, the reality is that I believe anybody who watches this meeting believes that you don't treat everybody else with the same respect that you demand for yourself. And I get offended not only for myself, but I get offended for people who have to sit there and listen to these items of substance that you claim to be such an emergency, and yet they're not even on an agenda for everybody else in the town to have a chance to weigh in on.
You know why it's not?
So I think...
You know why it's not?
Mr. McDonald, please, Mr. McDonald.
So I think what's important is that the town and that this Board of Selectmen doesn't sit here silent and somehow give some tacit approval of what you're talking about. I think it's important for us to say, you know what, you can show up all you want, you can glare at people, You can knock on people's doors at all hours of the night. You can do whatever you believe is an exercise of your free speech until it imposes on other people, until it breaks the rules, and until it's just so disrespectful that the chairman shouldn't tolerate it. So,
There's large amounts of money, Mr. Newhouse. I tried to get on the agenda.
Mr. McDonald, you're done.
Mr.
McDonald, you're done. Did I send you a letter?
Huh?
Did I send you a
You could
letter?
have put me on the agenda. When
Mr.
you tried to
McDonald,
tell
you're
me
done.
that
You're done.
something's not an emergency, such as
all.
blasting, shaking gallons of oil beside our well field, that's an emergency. Sir, excuse me.
No, good night,
You
Mr.
don't think that's an emergency?
Mr. McDonald, you've been more than correct.
Sure, you're not a selectman. You're not a
That's
selectman.
fine. You've been
You need to
ruled out
go
of
catch
order.
some drug dealers.
You've been ruled out of
I had a guy the other day that had his house broken into 3 times. 3 times his house was broken into while your cops are down at the station, parked behind the station, inside. Do you understand that? 3 times his house was broken into. And you guys sit there like you're heroes. You're not heroes. Have a good night. Can we call back? Thank you very much.
Okay. New business committee reports. Start down there, or?
Sure. Mr. Newhouse, that was the most articulate collection of comments. I applaud the way you framed that discussion. I wish I could have assembled those comments myself, but I very much appreciate you taking the time to speak them. I'm hopeful that the residents who witnessed this charade and the mockery that that person, and frankly, I want to stop using the name, because he discredits what we are as a community about. He discredits, in my opinion, what this board is here to do. And so I appreciate what you had to say. Okay, so that all said, I wanted to pay tribute again to the Liberty Mutual folks that came here tonight and thank all of the town of Wilmington. I already did that, so I won't go over it again. I want to also thank you, Mr. Somaglia, in your role as the veterans agent in town for assembling a moving tribute to our veterans the other day on the 11th. It was very well represented, very well attended by the residents, so thank you all for coming out. It was moving, it was touching. It's always great to see our American heroes come out and get the appreciation that they so deserve. So thank you for assembling that. Thanks to everyone for coming out. I had more, but I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to be redundant. I do applaud the comments of the board. I feel that I would like to pick and choose moments of speaking in terms of adding to the discussion, and I feel that all the critical points for the benefit of this board and for the residents that are here tonight and at home certainly have been said, so I don't feel the need to restate them. I certainly would be remiss if I did not compliment the town and also you, Mr. Smugler, as the veterans agent for the veteran services that did take place here in Wilmington. I think it's extremely important for us as a nation and also at every local community level to honor our veterans and also pay respect to those past, present, and those that will serve in the military in the future. In addition, I thought it was nice to have a total effort, excuse me, with police, fire there, as well as the Wilmington Band. The DPW does a nice job as well. Certainly all the various military branches, the Minutemen that were there, and certainly any other organization that I may not have mentioned. I do know the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and whatnot were there as well. So I thought it was just a very fitting tribute. We had our legislative delegation there as well, and I think it's certainly just another shining example of the community coming together. I do also want to congratulate the Wilmington Fire Department for receiving that award. I do know that that took place earlier this evening, but I wanted to try and save all of my comments together. And I do want to point out just in one of the comments that was made by Mr. McDonald, I certainly will not be answering that question, but I do want to state just for a point of clarity that I do have a family member who is a superintendent of another institution, educational institution in Massachusetts, Essex Aggie. They are involved in a school building project. That is completely separate from any involvement of the town of Wilmington. My uncle, Dan O'Connell, is a superintendent, is not a resident of this town. He is not a tax-paying citizen here. He was born and raised in the town and did attend public schools, and that's the extent of it, and he is an alumni. Certainly, I do see him at family occasions, and certainly we do celebrate as a family, but that is completely separate and has no bearing on this forum or any other forum that has any relevance to the town of Wilmington. So I just want to clear that up to make people aware that any educational standards that are utilized there or here are in conjunction with the Massachusetts Department of Education and what is upheld by the laws of Massachusetts. So I just want to make sure that that point is made for the general public. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate the Wilmington Pop Warner D team. They had a game at the Wilmington High School last week. They lost in the Eastern Mass Finals. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and I wish the Wilmington Wildcats good luck on Thanksgiving Day against Tewksbury. And also, I applaud all the people that showed up last Friday on Veterans Day. The crowd was amazing. I feel there was hundreds of people there, hundreds of veterans that have served this country honorably, and they know what freedom of speech is because they fought for it. And I appreciate all the people, especially the young children that come out Friday. That was amazing to see so many people there. And thank you, and important dates.
Mr. Chairman, in terms of the important dates, we will continue with curbside collection of yard waste through December 2nd on your regular trash collection day. The last day to register to vote in the special town election is this Wednesday, November 16th, and the town clerk's office, it'll be open until 8 p.m. Again, if you're already registered, you don't have to re-register, but for those who are not registered in the town, if they wish to vote in the special town election on the high school question, they have until Wednesday, November 16th, until 8 p.m. On that same date, we have brush drop-off at Old Main Street, and also on November 19th, there's brush drop at Old Main Street. And again, that continues at the Old Main Street Recycling Center on successive Wednesdays and Saturdays, as we've announced in the past. November 17th is the next meeting of the high school building committee. We held here at the town hall beginning at 6:30. On November 19th, you're invited to attend the Senior Citizen Holiday Craft Fair at the Bissell Senior Center from 9 to 2. As we had mentioned before, an important meeting in conjunction with the special town election will be held on November 21st. It is the Finance Committee public hearing. It will be here at the Town Hall Auditorium. That's Monday, November 21st, beginning at 7 p.m., where we will have a public review again of the 6 warrant articles that are contained in the special election warrant. The Finance Committee will conduct the hearing for the purpose of making a determination on what their recommendations are to be. As the chairman mentioned, we wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. The town offices obviously will be closed on that Thursday, but we are open for business the Wednesday before, full day, and the Friday after Thanksgiving, full day, as always. On November 28th, in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen meeting, we will have the discussion of the local property tax policy with reference to classification for fiscal year 2012. That will be held here at 7:15 p.m. You are reminded of the Olin Public Information Meeting, which has been discussed. It'll be at the middle school auditorium on Wednesday, November 30th at 7 p.m. And then just, again, advance reminders of the special town election. The referendum question is December 6th. Polls open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Absentee ballots are available now. And the special town meeting will be at 10:30 on December 10th, Saturday morning, at the high school gymnasium.
Is that it?
That's it.
What's that?
December 3rd?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yes. Well, we'll have one more meeting on November 28th, and we'll give you the rundown on the tree lighting.
Thank you. Good evening. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.